You don't have to live in the woods to get bit by a tick. It can happen in your backyard, on a walk, even pulling weeds in your own garden. So how do you actually protect yourself? And what do you do in those first crucial hours if you find one that attached to you? That's what we're getting into today. So welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast, everyone.
Welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast. We're Marnie and Stephanie, and each week we share grounded, practical tools to help you feel strong, steady, and energized in midlife and beyond.
Today we are joined by Ali Moresco, a tick-borne disease survivor and one of the most recognized Lyme disease advocates in the country. Ali spent 2 years searching for a diagnosis before learning she had Lyme disease, along with several co-infections. And she's turned that experience into a mission, helping people catch the signs early and protect themselves before it ever gets that far. She's executive board chair of Project Lyme, and her advocacy has helped shape federal tick-borne disease legislation. Ali, welcome to our show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
And we are very excited to have you. And before we get into prevention and protocol, we have to ask, after everything you've been through, do you still enjoy being outside? Or is there a part of you that's a little bit on guard or nervous being outside?
It might shock you. My answer might shock you, but I actually really do enjoy being outside. I find it very grounding and very healing. So while I don't think I could ever go back to the specific place where I got bit, just too many memories, stress, PTSD, the whole 9 yards. I do love a good natural tick spray and some good nerdy high socks and a hat. And I am out in my urban garden almost every single day. So I still enjoy it.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that your unfortunate illness didn't prevent you from enjoying the outdoors, because you're right, it is so grounding.
Yeah, I definitely take precautions, and you'll never catch me in tall grasses, but my tomato plants I'm good with, or a walk I'm good with, and safe activities.
This episode is when we heard about you, Stephanie and I are huge hikers. So this just feels so relevant to, I know you don't have to be a hiker to get bit by a tick, but it really struck me as something that I felt like I needed to learn more about. So really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So can you take us back to before, when Lyme disease was even part of your vocabulary? What did those early symptoms look like? And how long was it before anyone connected your symptoms to the tick bite? And maybe even share, you mentioned where you got bit, because I'm kind of curious when you said, you don't want to go back there.
So I was in my early 20s. And like most people in their early 20s, I thought I had my whole life figured out, this perfect blueprint of how things were going to go, because you don't know yet that life often takes its own path and you cannot plan things out perfectly, which is a tough thing to learn. And I was working in entertainment PR. I had just founded my first company and was working at Sundance Film Festival every year, and got an executive producer credit on one of Facebook's very first TV shows that they produced. And things were going along exactly as I had envisioned in my head. And then, I was dating a very handsome boy at the time that I had met, about a year prior, who's my now husband, thank God. And he is from Michigan. And I was living in Chicago. We met in Chicago. And at the end of that first year of us dating, I got invited on his yearly family trip up to northern Michigan, way, way up north. And, I'm not necessarily a woodsy person. I like to be outside. I like to eat a meal on a patio. I'm Italian. I grow tomato plants now, but I am not, this wildly woodsy person like people maybe imagine, contract Lyme. So I went to northern Michigan with his family, and thankfully my family is originally from the East Coast. So my parents were very aware of ticks, very aware of tick-borne illness and Lyme disease. And, my mom said to me, wear tall socks and wear a hat, and here's all this DEET to bring with you, and do tick checks, and don't go into the woods, stay on the path. And I am a rule follower, so I did all those things. But I still came home from that trip one time in the woods like that, took preventative measures, and I had cold and flu-like symptoms and a rash that I fondly or not so fondly reflect back on and call my spotted leopard rash from my head to my toes. And I went into my GP's office and said, I feel terrible. What's wrong with me? Do I have a sinus infection? Do I have a flu? Do I, what help? SOS. And she was like, you've got a summer cold. You'll be fine. You'll be fine in a couple days. And that cycle repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated for months until finally they started testing me for things like lupus and autoimmune conditions and, chronic diseases. And every single time I would get a call or I'd go back into the doctor's office and they would say to me, great news. You're the picture of health. Your blood work looks fabulous. There's nothing wrong. And then I started going from specialist to specialist, and it was a very similar situation where I would get told, you're working too hard, you're stressed, it's anxiety, it's depression, you need to calm yourself. And, when there's very real physical pain, it's not anxiety and it's not stress. So unfortunately, that pattern went on for about 2 years of these very severe cold and flu symptoms that came and went, which were my first symptoms, this rash. And over the course of 2 years, it progressed into things like memory loss and pain and weakness and chronic fatigue, which is unfortunately very common.
So you didn't actually see a tick or feel a bite. Question number one. Question number two, from the time that you left that vacation, how long was it until you started experiencing the symptoms?
When reflecting back, it was over 10 years ago, but it was, I'd say, within a week that I came back and felt like I had picked something up. And initially I did think, it's just we're with a lot of people because it's my husband has this massive family. Everybody goes. And my entire life, I feel like I have just been a petri dish for illnesses. So I didn't think too much of it until it didn't go away.
Wow. I mean, 2 years of going from doctor to doctor and specialist to specialist with no alarming blood work, but the fact that they honestly dismissed your physical symptoms. So sometimes the blood work says you're fine. Marnie and I talk about this all the time in relation to health, but yet you have symptoms that are screaming at you. Your body is communicating that something is off. So who was it? When did you finally get this diagnosis and get on a path to healing?
So the funny thing is that my GP that I had initially seen for my symptoms, the first thing I want to backtrack and call out is that about a month into this journey where I wasn't getting better, I don't care how old you are, sometimes you need an advocate to go with you. So my mom went with me, and my mom asked my GP, should we test her for Lyme disease? And she said, no, it's not. She wasn't on the East Coast. It's a waste, and just dismissed it.
Wow.
Which now we know Lyme disease is in all 50 states. I know there was a study in May that came out that right now in some parts of Michigan, 1 in 2 ticks is testing positive for Lyme disease. So we know it's a problem there. And then 2 years later, within this same large hospital system that my GP was at, there was a specialist, Dr. Robert Dumont, who looked at me and said, have you ever been tested for Lyme disease? And I said no, because he had just had a case very similar, eerily similar to mine. It still gives me goosebumps to talk about. And the woman had Lyme. And that was actually the only reason he knew he was an infectious disease, to see if I had Lyme or a different tick-borne condition. So I think I was very fortunate there. And even though it took 2 years, I've talked now with thousands of patients over the last 10 years through my advocacy work, and 2 years is on the shorter end, which is really sad to think about.
You know that feeling when summer is flying by and you're just not feeling your best, a little bloated, maybe tired, not quite yourself. That's honestly what the Do It Anytime Vitality Reboot is for. It's a 7-day functional medicine detox, no extreme restrictions, no complicated protocols, and Stephanie and I are with you every single step of the way. Summer is the perfect time to hit reset. Check the link in our show notes and let's do this together. So you got tested, and obviously you tested positive right away. And then were they able to give you the treatment, or do you need to be treated immediately? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, wonderful question. And I wish that the therapies for tick-borne illness and for Lyme disease and the testing were more straightforward. So unfortunately, the testing for Lyme disease, and we know this now because of a fabulous gold standard study that came out that was funded by Bay Area Lyme Foundation about a month and a half, 2 months ago, where they found out that the 4 most common Lyme disease tests, called 2-tier tests, are anywhere from 64 to 78% inaccurate. So they are missing 64 to 78% of cases, especially in early Lyme. So it was with it, 6 to 8 weeks after that bite, which is really that critical period for diagnosis. So if you're to walk into your GP's office and get tested, it's probably not going to come back correctly. So the way that these two-tier or many of these two-tier tests work is that there's positive, negative, and inconclusive. And if it's inconclusive, you're supposed to continue testing. So the first time actually that I was ever tested for Lyme, it was inconclusive. But I had also been sick for 2 years. So that testing is not going to be accurate. And thankfully, the specialist knew enough to test me with more accurate labs. And that's how I ended up finding out that I had not just Lyme disease, but Babesia, Bartonella, ehrlichiosis, relapsing fever that all had to be addressed systematically. So Dr. Dumont at the hospital system thankfully referred me to a tick-borne illness specialist that really understood what needed to be done. And I started treatment with him. But it's really important to remember that there's not a cure for this. There's not one set protocol that works for everyone. So it ended up taking me about 8 years to get well and be at, where I am now, which is why I like to say I'm mostly well. I have some off days, I have some days where I'm a little bit tired. I had a relapse of one of my conditions last year, after a really bad bout of COVID, but eventually did find something that worked. So it's like those memes you see on Instagram where it's like there is no linear path and it's this jagged, up and down. Like that is absolutely the journey of a Lyme and tick-borne illness patient. And that was my journey through and through.
Wow.
I mean, I've heard so many stories about people with Lyme, but I'm always just so saddened by this because, obviously there's a lot of awful chronic conditions. Can you just share a snippet of what at your worst or at sort of your lowest point, what did your day look like? Like when you say chronic fatigue and you battled all these symptoms and obviously your immune system is very suppressed, were you able to work? Were you able to how were you able to function? I'm just kind of curious.
Eventually these symptoms were extremely severe. And I think it's almost hard to fathom if thankfully somebody has not experienced it themselves. It's not as simple as just pushing through it, which was my internal anger because I was an incredibly ambitious, driven, career-focused woman, as I still am, but in a very different way. And it was like, just be a little bit stronger, have a little bit more grit, push through. And eventually you really just can't, you're not capable. It was just this 24/7, absolutely crushing fatigue. And I just remember I would just lay there in my bed for hours and hours and hours. And I would listen to frequency music and just with my eyes closed. I needed help, just to walk across my room to my bathroom. And I felt like I was in my early 20s, living with dementia, because from one day to the next, I couldn't remember things. I still have whole chunks of my memory that are gone. And every once in a while now there'll be something I either see or do and it will trigger this memory. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was like a black hole. So after, I finally got diagnosed, I finally started treating, which is a whole battle in itself because you are going through these Herxheimer reactions because Lyme disease, Borrelia, is a spirochetal illness. You have this die-off reaction that's very similar to syphilis, where you feel a million times worse before you get better. And it was just this daily battle of being in the thick of it. And I ended up taking a 2-year break from work. I got involved in advocacy and philanthropy, where I could. And that kind of became my passion. And I really thought I would never get better. It was so bad. You just can't see through the fog. And it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating.
I'm so sorry that you went through all of this and are still, it sounds like, having some residual issues from it. And I love that you've taken this and turned it into advocacy work and education. I think that's amazing. And a lot of people don't do that when they're struggling. So kudos to you for that and for coming on our show, because we want to prevent someone else from hopefully going through what you went through, right? That's the idea here. And so I'm wondering, how are people getting bit by ticks and what are these misconceptions out there? And why are we hearing about this more and more? Are there more ticks spreading disease, or did we just not know about it?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And, look, when I was bit 10 years ago, I was told I had a rare disease. So I'm walking around telling people I have a rare condition, which I learned was not the case once I got involved, in the nonprofits and started meeting all of these other people like me. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people with this out there. Of course, one of the biggest misconceptions is that Lyme disease is only on the East Coast, and that is just not the case. It is in all 50 states. I know California has had one of their worst tick years, that they have had in our history. The spring is nymph tick season, and nymph ticks are the size of a pinhead or smaller. It looks like a little freckle. And that's why oftentimes you don't even find these ticks on you, because they are just so, so teeny tiny, and they're missed. And so another huge misconception is that you have to either find a tick or have a bullseye rash, to have contracted Lyme, when once again, now we know, thankfully, through all this great research that's been funded over the last number of years, that less than 50% of people present with a bullseye rash when they are infected. And it doesn't always look like a bullseye rash. I think the last piece of really key misinformation about tick bites that I would like to really emphasize is that it's not just the woods that you have to be concerned about. I mean, the New York Times ran a huge story about this huge uptick in tick bites in Central Park. So you can get bit, like I said, I have an urban garden. I'm out there every day. I could get bit in my garden, but I take preventative measures and I do a tick check. So I don't want people to be fearful or live in fear of being outside, because I certainly don't. But prevention is really the best method that we have to combat Lyme disease.
Yeah, and it's funny, I don't know if it's the same article you're referring to, but there was an article just this week in the Wall Street Journal. It wasn't in the New York Times. It was in the Wall Street Journal. And it was funny because I was preparing for this interview, and then all of a sudden this article appears, very lengthy article. And I mean, the number of cases, but it shows a map of the US, to your point, with all the different types of ticks and the counties across the country where people are seeing a lot of cases of Lyme. But there's also other illnesses that people are getting, and even allergies. And the article started by talking about someone who died. So I guess the point is you can get Lyme disease, but there's also other conditions that you can get from a tick bite, which I thought was interesting. That was new information to me. So I don't know, maybe you could even talk at some point a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Right now, we've all seen a lot of coverage of a tick-borne allergy called alpha-gal. And it's been around for a long time. They officially, named it in the early 2000s. So I want to be really clear that this is not a new disease, as you might have seen online, hand in hand with that misinformation. And it is an allergy that you get to mammalian meat from the bite of an infected tick. We now know that it's not just the Lone Star tick that can give you alpha-gal. And something I would love for people to walk away from is that a lot of times when you're seeing alpha-gal be discussed online, they're saying, oh, it's this allergy that makes you allergic to red meat. Well, yes, but it also can give you a whole host of other symptoms like chronic fatigue, like brain fog, like hives, like severe gastro distress. And the severity is really on a scale. So some people might eat a steak and have a little bit of itching and have alpha-gal. Some people might literally walk by somebody eating a steak and just get the particles in the air and have a very severe anaphylactic reaction. And after the tick bite, it can take up to 8 weeks for those symptoms to present. So, people just want to be mindful of it. The two other really prevalent conditions right now, at least within the US, are Babesiosis and Bartonella in the Hudson Valley, so in parts of New York. Once again, about 1 in 10 ticks are testing positive for Lyme and Babesia or Bartonella. Bartonella typically presents actually as psychiatric conditions, and Babesiosis is actually a parasitic infection of the red blood cells. So I like to tell people, if you get tested for Lyme and properly, and it comes back clean and you're still having these odd symptoms, ask your provider about Babesiosis and Bartonella.
Wow. So much to think about. This is a little bit scary. How can we prevent tick bites? I mean, and I'm thinking about you who went in the woods with your socks and your hat and your DEET and you still got a tick bite. What can we do? I'm in the woods every day. Literally, I'm walking in the woods almost every day. So now I'm like, oh, what if I've already gotten bitten by a tick and I don't even know it? And I don't do tick checks. Yeah. I rarely do tick checks.
Well, now you're going to start. So it's all going to be good.
Yeah. So what should I do? And DEET is, has its own set of issues, being the strong chemicals that are in DEET. So how do I prevent this and still enjoy my outdoorsy time?
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you what I do. So I wear the tall socks, I wear a hat, I'll wear a light, loose, long sleeve or long pant. If I'm really out hiking or in the woods the way you are, and I would tuck my pants into my socks, because the way that ticks quest for their host is they will climb up you and they will look for a point. Sorry, I know it's gross. They'll look for a point of entry. And that's why oftentimes people will find ticks between their toes or the back of their knee or in their private area, because that tick grabs on and it climbs up. So that's the first thing, is if you're really in a heavily wooded or high grassy area, tall socks, long pants, long sleeves, hat. Secondly is thankfully there are really fabulous, natural, non-toxic tick sprays. There's a couple that
I'll order that today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, please let us know what that is.
Yeah. My favorite, and this is not like, I don't do any type of paid partnerships, just to be really clear, but my favorite that I personally buy is called Three Moms Organics. And there's also one called TikTok Naturals that's really fabulous. And I keep it in my gardening bin. Anytime I'm going outside, I douse myself in it. Honestly, it also smells really good. So like win-win there. And it's just essential oils. So you can feel, you don't feel then like you need to go, hop in a sauna and detox the toxins out. Another tool that I really like is called a tick mitt. And you can buy it on Amazon. I know they have them at Costco right now. And it's like this microfiber mitt that slips on your hand. And I have two huge black standard poodles. So I tick mitt them off because dogs can bring ticks into your home. And I tick mitt myself from my head to my toes. And if you find a tick on you or your pet, it literally gets caught in the loop on the mitt. And then you stick it into your dryer for 10 minutes and it kills anything that's on it. And then lastly, of course, doing your tick check. It will take you 60 seconds if you have somebody at home that can do it with you and kind of, look through your hair and then just feel, behind your ears, check all the way down your body. Because while there is no minimum attachment time for tick-borne illness and diseases like Powassan can transmit in 15 minutes or less, the reality is that the faster you catch it, the less likely you are to contract a tick-borne disease if they're carrying one. So a tick check is super simple, it's free, it's accessible, and it's something everyone should be doing.
Are you loving this conversation and want even more ways to live your happiest, healthiest, and most authentic life? Then we'd love for you to join our growing community on Substack. When you subscribe, you'll get bonus content and behind-the-scenes insights from us, plus you'll be the first to know about our upcoming programs and events. Your support helps us keep bringing inspiring guests and impactful conversations straight to you each week. So head to the link in our show notes, sign up today, and let's continue this journey together to create the art of living well. I had heard a long time ago, Marnie and I both live in Minnesota. So any one time you go up north, I never heard of, I didn't have this growing up because I wasn't in a wooded area, but it does seem like people in Minnesota generally are aware of ticks, especially those that go up north. But if you found the tick and you got on antibiotics within a certain amount of time, that would reduce the risk or eliminate the risk. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. For Lyme disease, at least, there's prophylactic doxycycline. I really like the ILADS guidelines, which are just on their website if anyone needs them or wants to share them with their doctor. There are guidelines for prophylactic doxycycline. So it's just like if you get bit by a tick, here's what you take. And then there's guidelines for if you do develop a bullseye rash, which, like I said, is rare, but like that is your diagnosis. You have Lyme disease and you need a long course of doxycycline to clear that up so that it does not end up becoming chronic.
So I remember being a kid and having many ticks on me at camp. And I remember they used to light a match.
Oh, no.
Do you know these old things about lighting a match to like get the head off or pull it out? I don't totally remember the details, but I remember being terrified that they were like going to bring a match by my leg or whatever it was. But now you just take a tweezers, or if you don't have a tweezers, what do you do?
Yeah, so you definitely do not want to scare it by lighting a match or burning it off. Or the other misconception I hear is like smothering it with like dish soap or Vaseline. And you don't want to do any of those things because it scares the tick, as it would scare me if somebody put a match near my butt and the tick regurgitates everything in its system into your body.
Oh.
Which once again heightens the risk of a tick-borne illness transmission, heightens the risk of the head detaching under your skin. And then that's an ER visit, right? To like get the tick head out. Like just don't do it. So what I tell people is you are exactly right, Marnie. You get just a fine-tipped pair of tweezers. And if you're listening to this, go on Amazon and order them for a couple bucks or wherever, right now, and just keep it in your, little backpack if you're hiking or in your car. Like I always recommend, keep a set of tick bite prevention items in your car and in your home. And then you're always prepared. And you just want to take those fine tip tweezers, grasp that tick as far down as you can on its body. And you just very strongly just pull straight up and take the entire tick out. And that's the best way to pull that tick off of you.
Okay. And I heard something about like freezing the tick, or should you keep it? Like what should you do with the tick after you remove it?
So no matter how badly you might want to kill that tick or flush it down your toilet and watch it suffer. Fight the urge and put it either in a plastic bag or a jar and send it for tick testing. Because, unfortunately, as I mentioned, like the human lab testing is not always accurate, but there are labs, specialized labs that can test the tick for you. And some states and universities actually offer free tick testing. So I always say Google that first, and you might just be able to send that tick in to be tested for free. And then it also helps with surveillance in the state of what tick-borne illnesses are present. If not, there are a couple of really fabulous labs that offer tick testing, and it's just a good thing to do, even if it's for peace of mind.
Yeah. I mean, you do that with bats, right? Like you have to say, supposedly you save the bat and you bring it in somewhere so they can test it for rabies. It's the same idea, I guess. So let's say if you don't have symptoms, you can assume that you have not been bit by a tick, right? But how much time, like if someone got bit unbeknownst to them a year ago, could their symptoms come out that much later? Or like what does that timeline look like?
Absolutely. So this is the challenge is this is a really smart bug and it's sneaky. And after Borrelia, you get bit by a tick or, however you're getting this and it enters your system, it is heading straight for your lymphatic system. So it is just dispersing itself all over your body so that it can make you a nice little bug condo. As I like to say, it has a nice warm little home now. And every single person is like biologically different. So I might get bit and present with symptoms right away. Someone else might get bit and it might be 3 years down the road that they have a stressful life event and it's a trigger and they wake up one day with chronic Lyme disease or chronic tick-borne illness symptoms. So I always think it's really important to, if you have mystery symptoms that are unexplained, that don't fit in a neat little box, or if you know that you have had a history of a tick bite, whether you had a bullseye rash or not, to share that information with your doctor and ask to be tested for tick-borne illness. Because it's very individualized person to person.
Which is the scary part, right?
Yeah.
Because these symptoms present themselves so differently, which is why it's so hard, I think, to diagnose, or it has been. What are you seeing, just because you're doing all this advocacy work and policy work, what are you seeing as far as different ways to help to reduce the number of ticks out there? Just like something that's hopeful, I guess, like on the horizon that you're involved with or that you're seeing. And I know you're so active on Instagram and sharing a lot of this information. So we definitely would encourage people to follow Ali and all the work that you're doing. But if you can talk a little bit about that right now.
That's so nice. Thank you. And I always like to say, I have a ton of hope. I really do. The needle is being moved every single day. I would say right now, one of the projects that makes me the most hopeful about the future of tick-borne illness and people not having to suffer the way that I did to get my diagnosis. One of the projects that makes me the most hopeful is happening at MIT. It's called the Maestro Study, and it's led by a phenomenal researcher. Her name's Dr. Mickey Tall, and her goal is to be able to measure these symptoms that we are currently being told are immeasurable. So things like brain fog and severe chronic fatigue, and she's doing it through new unique methods. It's the largest clinical study with over 200 patients that has ever been done at MIT, which is huge. So I think at some point there will be a much better way to diagnose these chronic conditions and actually measure what patients are going through. We also now have accurate tick-borne illness testing. It's just a matter of now having that, testing be commercialized and go mainstream, which once again, huge step in the right direction. And as far as vector-borne disease control, I'm hearing about new things every single day. I heard about a piece of research that's happening, a study I was reading actually just last week, where a group of scientists are finding a way to vaccinate small mammals like mice and rabbits and squirrels and birds to essentially like eradicate the Borrelia so that when they are then biting a host, that Borrelia is not being transmitted. And that's actually what they just proved. And so now they're on to, whatever the next step in their research process is. I wish I was smart enough to be a researcher or scientist. I'm just not. I'm just your nerdy friend that likes to read about it. So they're finding ways, to reduce the load. But I would say right now, not to harp on prevention, but that truly is, it's the best thing we have to reduce the burden of tick-borne illness in humans.
Prevention and just education and being knowledgeable
Absolutely.
and know about it, right? Because if you don't even know about any of this stuff, then it's not even on your radar to ask questions.
Absolutely.
So tell us about Project Lyme.
So, unfortunately, tick-borne illness research historically has been severely underfunded by the federal government. We have started to see that change over the last 6 years, thanks to a group called Center for Lyme Action that got the Kay-Hagan Tick Act passed, and now it's up for reapproval. So fingers crossed there, because they've done a lot of good work through that. And Project Lyme is a 501c3, and we exist to fund research, to provide education, to support patient advocacy around Lyme and tick-borne illness. And these 501c3s are really critical in that space because of the historic lack of government funding, which means that we have this huge gap in understanding around the condition. So when you go through something like Lyme or a tick-borne illness and it kind of shatters everything as you start to get better and you kind of start to rebuild your life, at least for me, getting involved with Project Lyme and serving on their board, it's kind of turned this pain into it's given it a purpose, if you will, to do something with it, which feels really good. But Project Lyme has all kinds of resources on their website, which is projectlyme.org, which is always where I send people if they're questioning, whether they could have Lyme or a tick-borne illness or if they've just been bitten by a tick. It gives you really good factual information.
That is so good to know and such a valuable resource for people. Okay, I want to backtrack just for a second because I had this question earlier and I totally forgot. So sorry if it doesn't fit in perfectly right now. But when you talked about when you were diagnosed after 2 years and then you had all these protocols, and obviously the protocols vary, and this is, protocols are something Marnie and I do talk about quite a bit on this show. Can you share with the listeners? I think it would be really helpful for them to understand, what are these protocols? It's not just take an antibiotic for 2 weeks and you're going to feel better, right? And like you said, it's been 8 years, I think, and you still have some relapses. So when you have a relapse, then what are you doing? I'd just be curious. So people understand the day-to-day impact on your life and what you still need to be very mindful of. And are there other changes that you've had to make? Sorry, I'm asking 3 questions here. If you could just talk a little bit about that, I think our listeners would love to hear.
Yeah, treating tick-borne illness is unfortunately not straightforward or cut and dry. And what works for one person might not work for another. I have had friends along the way where we've done the same exact treatment at the same time and they've gone into remission and I haven't, and vice versa, which is one of the big challenges. So when I started my journey of treating my tick-borne illnesses, it was a lot of oral medications coupled with supplement and herbs. And then as I got worse and worse and worse, my provider did IV antibiotics. So I did IV antibiotics that I actually really think saved my life because I just was so sick at the time. And then what ended up really working for me was, I got really fortunate to have been connected years ago with Dr. Richard Horowitz, who is one of the best providers in the space, one of the best researchers in the space. And he is one of the few that has a treatment protocol called dapsone therapy or double dapsone therapy that has now been published and peer reviewed many times over. And for me, thankfully, not good. That's what worked. I did a handful of rounds of dapsone and double dapsone therapy, and those are short-term protocols, which is great. So it's 6 weeks and it's the certain combination, of medications. And if anyone listening knows, anything about dapsone medication itself, it's a very old school medication. And you take, these other medications around it, really. So this therapy works in tandem with these other items, and it's intensive. I like to say it's not the worst treatment I've ever done. There were a lot of things where I had way worse reactions. So also was very fortunate there, but it's not an easy road, to figure out what works for you and to get better. And you could be with the best provider in the world. And because these cases are just so unique and so complex, it can take a long time for them to really figure you out. And along the way, we ended up finding out that I actually had a severe immune deficiency, which is separate from my tick-borne issues, called specific antibody deficiency. And because of that, I had no immune system to fight these illnesses. So I started getting infusions of immune globulins, which is the treatment for primary immune deficiency. And that also really, really helped. Or I don't think any therapy would have moved the needle because my immune system could not mount a response. And that was, I think, a big, unlock in this process. But it's a lot of discipline, a lot of routine. And I know, for some people and at certain parts of my journey, it was taking pills every 2 hours all day, every day, just to try to recover and get my life back. As far as the relapses go, we think of tick-borne illness. It is an IACI condition, an infection-associated chronic illness. In most people, once it's chronic, it's not something that you completely eradicate from the system. It's something you live with, even if you have no symptoms. And there are some people that have no symptoms. And there are some days where I feel like I have no symptoms, and I'm super grateful. But there are certain triggers that can reactivate those conditions. And, for me, because I am immune compromised, when I get COVID, it's a really horrible, horrible experience that takes months and months to recover. And I had 2 back-to-back COVID cases last year that triggered a condition called babesiosis. But also, thanks to modern medicine now, there is a newer treatment for babesiosis called tefenoquine therapy that Polybio, Amy Prohl at Polybio has studied. Yale, I believe, is the group, a research team at Yale that did the original study on tefenoquine and a combination of a couple of other medications, and found that it can put babesiosis back into remission in 7 or 9 weeks. So I did a 9-week tefenoquine protocol and right away. And thankfully for me, that worked. So I'm super grateful to everyone that's pouring their time into these conditions, because now we have options we never thought we'd have.
Wow. It's like overwhelming to think about. And the fact that there's no straightforward protocol, which, we are all bio-individual, which is what we talk about a lot. So that makes sense, but still overwhelming. Like, I'm thinking about how maybe sauna would help. I don't know. Or like, we have this supplement called a binder. Like, that's kind of the first thing that came to my mind. Like, do you take a binder and go in your sauna? It's overwhelming.
Yeah. And I love detox. I mean, I have an infrared sauna in my house. I love binders. I have like a pretty, I don't want to say rigorous detox protocol, but I feel a lot better when I do things like binding and sweating, or I religiously, every 2 to 4 weeks, I go and see a professional for manual lymphatic drainage. And there are things like that, non-traditional methods that really do help, or like red light therapy. Every morning for 10 minutes while I have my coffee, I sit in front of my red light like a lizard, outside. But it really helps. It moves the needle.
Well, that's great to hear that some of those other modalities are helping you on more of a day-to-day, almost preventative basis, or just as part of your lifestyle.
So I know we're going to have to wrap up this conversation, and I'm wondering, where can our listeners connect with you? We know you have a PR agency and a podcast as well.
Yes, all the fun things. Probably the best place to connect with me for any type of health-related information is on Instagram at Ali Moresco. I am a modernized healthcare publicist by trade and founded Moresco Public Relations and Advisory about 6 years ago. So that's just at amorescopr.com. And there's a whole bunch of free resources for any healthcare thought leaders that are listening. And if you're questioning whether you could have Lyme or tick-borne condition, projectlyme.org is always a great resource.
Well, thank you for all that work that you're doing. So, Ali, one final question that we love asking all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
I don't want to overly simplify it, but I would say having most of my life be based in joy. When I got sick, I would not wish this on literally my worst enemy. But one of the gifts that it did give me was realizing at a very young age what actually matters, and having such a deep appreciation for even the smallest moments that I don't know that I would have noticed otherwise, because it just would have been in the day to day. Whereas now I'm so grateful because there's so many things that I couldn't do before. So the art of living well for me is enjoying my dogs and my husband and my family. And I'm really happy with that.
It's like the little things are the big things, really, right?
Yes, that is the perfect way to say it. Yes.
Yeah, that just gave me chills. Thank you so much for coming on our show today.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
And this is, dropping in the middle of tick season. So this is a really important topic, and I'm glad we're able to share this with everyone.
Yeah, I am too. And I'm deeply appreciative.
And before we go, if you do want to go deeper with us between episodes, our Substack is the place to do it. It's where Stephanie and I share personal reflections, things we're reading, experimenting with, our podcast conversations, and we would love to have you there. The link is in the show notes, so come find us. And again, Ali, thank you so much for being with us today. This is such an important conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Art of Living Well podcast. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It helps more people discover our show.
And if you're ready to take your health and happiness to the next level, we would love to support you. Whether it's through our transformative group programs, personalized coaching, or functional medicine lab testing, we help uncover the root causes of your health challenges and unlock your vitality.
Visit www.theartoflivingwell.us to learn more and book a free discovery call. Until next time, keep creating your art of living well.